And hello and welcome to Hanging on the Moon. Hello and welcome to Hanging on the Moon. I do that every week, but they do the double take on the Google Hangout. I don't like that, Chris Walter. It's like,
Two intros.
well, it's like they say you're live, and then this little thing pops up that says live. It's like, well,
Right.
which is it? So, I don't know. We'll check it on the replay to see which intro the people actually got. But we are here. It is a big day in the world of wrestling. For obvious reasons, the WWE second quarter report came out this morning. That is the big news and probably will be the majority of our conversation. One thing I want to clear up off the top, we had promised we were going to have a guest tomorrow on the podcast. It looks like that's not going to happen. See, Chris Walter, this is why I don't like pre things like what is
Promote.
that called? Yeah, promote. That's the word I'm looking for. We're off to a roaring start here on the podcast today. Uh, but yeah, Matt Taven and I, we were supposed to hook up, but we have not. We will in the future, and probably we'll have him not this week, but next week. We'll work it out during the week and see what we can do. But that's unfortunate because, in all honesty, I was looking forward to talking basketball with Matt Taven because he's one of our wrestling basketball guys, and I wanted his take on the NBA offseason, which has been its own little saga and story.
We'll shoo away our wrestling demographic with more basketball talk here on the podcast. But yeah, it sucks that Taven that fell through. But hopefully next week it can come on and we can talk some NBA.
Yeah, we'll get it all together, and no worries. I mean, I've listened to enough podcasts where people talk about other things, about their lives and stuff like that, and all of that. And, I even listened to CM Punk this week talk about like nothing to do with wrestling. So
The
kind of
Nerdist
par for the
podcast, you
course.
mean?
Yeah, which I thought if you went into it with the right mindset, very funny. Like
Right.
very good stuff. They talked a little old school '80s wrestling, but it really had very little to do with wrestling. Punk told a hilarious story about when he ran in
The
the
marathon,
Chicago
yeah.
Marathon. Great stuff. If you are just simply a fan of CM Punk and don't care if he talks about wrestling, I highly recommend it. That said, a lot of news to get to this week, and we should commence with that and all the preamble stuff we will stop. As we mentioned, WWE, their conference call today, huge news. We'll get to that in a minute, though, because there was bigger news, I think, before that broke on Sunday night. Uh, and that was the fact that TNA Wrestling, as we have speculated both here and on the podcast, guess what? Chris Walter, I said Spike TV, they might just not renew. Well, guess what? It looks like Spike TV isn't going to renew, and now TNA is just in full panic mode. Like, it is clearly obvious they are. I mean, they're announcing signings and they're acting like nothing's wrong. TNA is the wrestling ostrich of the world we live in. I mean, they seem to stick their head in the ground and hope everything will get better, but it clearly doesn't. And of course, caught up in all of this, part of the reason some are speculating Spike was not happy with them and decided to give them the boot was Vince Russo and the fact that it was made public that he was part of the company and he is now no more part of the company. So all of that has happened in the last week since we talked to people.
Look, about the whole Vince Russo thing, I could say, because at WrestlingRumors.net we have some guys who help Vince with his site, pyroandballyhoo.com. He was made aware about the TNA news, about the Spike TV deal falling through at the same time as everyone else when that TMZ story came out. So, and through my sources, and I do have sources, I can't name them, which like is a prick move in the media industry, but yeah, the Spike TV not renewing TNA had zero to do with Vince Russo, and you could take that to the bank. But as far as TNA, being without a network, You wouldn't know that through the social media accounts of like Dixie Carter and some of the superstars, some of the management. They're kind of saying negotiations are still happening with Spike TV. Hopefully, they can come to some sort of agreement where they can last past October, which I believe is the final month where they can keep airing Impact. So, yeah, I mean, unless it's kind of like a smokescreen, like you alluded to, they're going to be in deep trouble because I think if they leave Spike, whether they find another network or not, they're completely screwed.
Well, I mean, we're going to talk about the WWE in a few moments, but when you look at the WWE saga with their television deal, I think that tells you what a horrible landscape is out there for
Right.
TNA, because the WWE, let's face it, we don't even know if they had any real substantial buyers for their product, which, sorry to break it to TNA fans, in the eyes of the rest of the real world, is viewed on a much different level than TNA is. And they had trouble finding a partner that was willing to give them the type of money they were looking for. And the other thing, when you look at this whole TNA situation, let's even give them the benefit of the doubt and say they can find a network partner. There is little chance that that network partner is going to give them the amount of money Spike TV is currently giving them, and that's a problem too.
Yeah, the production values would take a significant hit. Plus, they'd probably have to make a lot of roster cuts just because they wouldn't be able to stay financially viable in a climate where Spike TV isn't feeding them cash all of the time. But I mean, even at their worst, Spike TV, I mean TNA Impact was still drawing, like 1 million viewers an episode, and a lot of networks are going to take some serious looks at that. Uh, some people mentioned, maybe True TV would be a taker. There was even the idea of making it just strictly an online show, which is never going to happen because they can't, they won't be able to last long in that format. But yeah, just the fact that they're leaving Spike TV, which is not really official, but it's more than likely that they're going to be gone by October. It's a huge hit to the company, and like today when they announced that Zema Ion signed a multi-year deal, an X Division guy. Why would they, even announce something like that during a time where the future of the company is in complete disarray? You know what I mean?
Let's just put it this way: I'd much rather have the contract that Red Dragon signed this week with ROH, because I'm pretty certain that they're actually going to get their money.
Hmm. Right, TNA was trying to go after them, right?
Yeah, there was him. Well, the names were rumored. It was never necessarily confirmed, but the names out there were Red Dragon, Jay Lethal was one, a couple others, and that all blew up in TNA's face, as most things do, unfortunately for them. But that said, I mean, there's been this kind of outcry of people being, sorry for the situation of TNA. In all honesty, they only have themselves to blame. And I mean, that's just being honest about it. And some people say, well, it's not the wrestler's fault. Well, okay. But you know what? They chose to work for this company that has done like some pretty inept things. And I mean, at the end of the day, it is what it is. And I'm more happy. Let's put it this way: I'm more happy to promote all the great things that Ring of Honor has done for themselves in 2014 than shed tears for TNA for all the stupid things that they've done in 2014.
Look, I would rather be a Ring of Honor guy right now than TNA. And even though ROH is looked at as like the number 3 company, just because TNA has more, has a network that they can go on like Spike TV and whatnot. I think, like we've said, we talk about this every week. ROH is just simply in a better position right now than
Yeah,
TNA wrestling.
like ROH is taking over that event, and that's one of the things we wanted to talk to Matt Taven about, and we will eventually. They're doing Field of Honor in Brooklyn, New York, coming up on August 15th, and that was, of course, an annual event for TNA at a baseball stadium. And then, of course, I don't know if it was this week or last week, but TNA ran that show at that baseball stadium in Kentucky, and they had 67 people. I mean, at some point, like, the Emperor has no clothes here.
Nice, nice wording of that. But yeah, and even like what they're doing right now, they're doing their New York episodes right now. They're in the where ECW used to tape their shows, and
No, it's
like
not
last
even
week,
where
wasn't it
ECW
an
taped.
ECW
It's
build? Like it
where
was
they
in the
used to tape
Hammerstein.
Raw. No, they're not in Hammerstein,
Oh,
which
it's not
is bigger.
Hammerstein.
No, it's in the
Oh,
ballroom where they used to
shows how much
tape
I know.
Raw. Manhattan Theater, I believe it's called,
Right? Yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right. But
which is
last
a
week,
smaller venue. Sorry, we're jumping all over each other today. I don't know
no,
why.
it's fine. That's what we do here on the podcast. We just talk over each other. We're just very rude people, and we don't give a damn.
If you're a
That's
new
how it comes
viewer, if you're a
out.
new viewer, that's not what happens, honestly.
Yeah, but yeah, like last week on Impact, they had the debuts, which are only going to last a couple weeks, of Ezekiel Jackson and Gene Snitsky. But the thing is, they taped these episodes over a month ago, so people already knew that this was going to happen. But they aired it a month after the fact, so it's kind of like, why would you even want to tune in? I think the taping schedules is one of the main reasons why this is so it's such a wreck. I mean, you can even look at the ratings that Friday Night SmackDown does. They do far worse ratings than Raw, obviously, because it's a taped show. Maybe if Impact was live, they would have a little bit more success because you wouldn't be reading the spoilers all the time 4 weeks ahead of the show. But that's just one of like a gluttony of problems for the company, and that's I'm not going to get into that because that would take an entire show.
Which, spoiler alert, both those guys you mentioned get fired at the end of the New York City tapings.
Exactly. So they could only afford them for if you could only afford Ezekiel Jackson for 2 shows, that just shows how much financial crap you're in right now. Sorry, no offense to Ezekiel Jackson.
And Matt Hardy has even been back with ROH since, which was one of the things that was wondered about. But Matt Hardy actually has appeared on an ROH show since those tapings in New York City. So apparently, they couldn't even get him into a deal to be committed to that company. So, I mean, that says something there, too, I think.
Speaking of Matt Hardy, tonight on their Destination X show, Wrestling Dream Match, something that I might actually tune in to watch. It's going to be the Wolves versus the Hardy Boys. So if you ever had a reason to tune into TNA product, that might be the one and only thing you would want to watch.
Well, I, sir, will be covering TNA, or not TNA, NXT for Between the Ropes right after we're done here. So
And
I will not be checking that out.
another thing, NXT officially confirmed the signing of Fergal Devitt, who actually posted a picture of him and Kenta at the NXT tapings today.
Yep, one more to go. The big guy,
Steiner.
yeah, the big guy, Kevin Steen, who is officially done with everyone now.
Mm-hmm.
He finished up at PWG, I believe it was last weekend, and maybe the most telling sign that he is given that the WWE is his future. When El Generico left PWG, he claimed that he was going to help the orphans, and Kevin Steen now is going to join El Generico to help the orphans. So take that for what you will.
Well, that and Jerry Lawler actually confirmed that Steen's going to WWE. So.
Oh, Jerry Lawler did. Well, wow.
Yeah, well, those two were having a pile driver versus pile driver match for some indie company, and when Lawler was cutting his promo for the event, he said Steen is going to WWE. So.
All right then. Well, thank you, Jerry. Normally Jerry is just updating us on which diva is hot. He actually broke some news. Good for Jerry Lawler.
He looked at Paige's ass again this past Monday night on Raw. He got caught. Lawler, you gotta get practicing on those eye movements, man. You can't literally stare because someone's gonna take a picture.
Well, shall we use this as our transition into our WWE talk?
Of course we should.
In the conference call today, they mentioned their number for the WWE Network, which we'll get to in a minute. But they also mentioned 7% of cuts to staff. Jerry Lawler, I'm just saying, you might not want to be checking out the girls' butts. A lot of people are, walking on eggshells at WWE right now, and rightfully so. I mean, the company is dead serious about cutting costs, despite the fact of the network number, which we'll get to in a minute. And I'm sure if you've been paying attention today as a wrestling fan, you already know what it is. But beyond that fact, the WWE is dead serious about cutting costs. And why Wall Street? We're bringing back Stockwatch today, Chris Walter.
Stockwatch.
Yes, that was on our podcast, not here on the video podcast. But folks will remember Stockwatch fondly if you have been following our podcast religiously. The stock actually did pretty well today. 12.33 it opened. It closed at 12.48. One of the big reasons why the WWE actually lost less than projected, losing $14.5 million this quarter, which was actually a good thing as they were projected to lose somewhere between 15 and 18 in this quarter. So that was the good news of the conference call.
One of very few good things to take away from that event. But only we could put like a positive spin on losing $14.5 million. Well, it could have been 18, could have been 17, but we only lost 14, so we're on the way up.
No, 14.5, Chris Walter. And was it on the video podcast?
Give or take,
Was it on the video podcast or on the audio podcast where we said we'd have our good news from wrestling this week? Because that's going to be mine. WWE only lost 14.
That's not even good news, though. It's not even good news.
It's good news.
It's barely good news. It's like teetering on the brink of being mediocre news.
It's good news when you compare it to the fact, and this is the big takeaway, aside from the 7% jobs cuts that the WWE is saying they will be making. They didn't give a timeline, but obviously fairly soon. One of the things that it was this number that is 700,000. And for people who forget what the number was the last time they let us in on it, it was only 667,000. So if you do the math, they have gained a whopping 33,000 subscribers. And that's net because they actually picked up about 170,000, but they lost something like 128. Which I'm a little confused about, because what about that commitment? What happened with that?
Well, what is it? February, March, April, May, June, July. So in July, it basically came to an end, right? The 6 months? Because it opened, when was it? It was February, right, when it started?
End of February. So February was not a leap year this year, so I think it was somewhere around the 26th, something like that.
But those subscription numbers only went until the end of June, if I'm correct.
Oh, okay.
It was June 31st. So, and then I completely forget when that week was where they had the free viewing for everybody. So I don't know exactly how that works out time-wise, but
that apparently tanks.
What, when the free pass for a week?
Yeah, that didn't go well. I mean, the idea of that was to get more subscribers. Clearly, that has not happened.
Well, the domestic numbers suck. There's no beating around the bush with that one. This thing is going to be made or broken with international, especially in the United Kingdom, which I think hits in October. Canada, Sweden, Norway, Spain, Australia, we're getting it in a couple weeks. But the UK, they're getting it a little bit later, and WWE wants to make sure that the network is basically perfect by that point, because over in Europe they have the more diehard fans, people that can't necessarily get access to the product as much as we can here in North America. So if the UK numbers tank, by WrestleMania 31, we'll probably have a pretty good indication as to whether this thing is going to be a monster success or it's going to be, done and completely over with.
Not to contradict you, but I don't know if that's necessarily the reason. I think the UK, it's about getting out of their television deal, which they were able to do in Canada, but it came at a price. And Rogers, oh my, did they just go to town with the WWE on this deal. Rogers broke their TV deal, signed a new 10-year extension with the WWE, but here's the caveat. They get to be the exclusive providers of the WWE network for a little bit, It's going to go on other networks, they say eventually, but they're controlling basically the WWE network here in Canada, which for people who live in Canada, quite frankly, sucks because if you're Canadian, I don't know too many Canadians that have positive things to say about Rogers as a company.
Not this guy, because I switched over from Rogers to Bell about 6 months ago. So
Well,
this
there
is
you go.
obviously a kick in the butt that
Yeah,
I
no
can't back.
WWE network for you, Walter.
Well, unless WWE announces that they're going to start really boning down on the people sharing accounts or whatever, then I might start sweating bullets. But that's what I'm doing right now. I don't have a problem with it. Rogers can keep the WWE network. They're still going to air, obviously, Monday Night Raw, SmackDown, and Main Event on Sportsnet 360. So that's all I need at this point. There's always other nefarious means to get the network, so I'm not really that worried. But it does. I
Wow.
mean, it does suck
Chris
for half of the
Walder.
market.
Chris Walder just brazenly saying, "Hey, I steal content. I'm okay with it."
I wouldn't pay for it. I've been very outspoken about it. There's no reason why I feel like I should put down. And $9.99 is reasonable now, but that price is obviously going to go up. It wouldn't shock me in the slightest if in another year from now this thing goes up to like $14.99 a month, and then it's not going to be worth it at all for pretty much anybody. The only pay-per-views I really consider, must-see watches are SummerSlam, Royal Rumble, and WrestleMania. Everything else, like the one we were just coming off of, Battleground, right? So I mean, it's cheap. You can get it on the network, but is that something I really need to see? And then the library still needs a lot of work, and the content, and it's not worth my money.
I see. I disagree. I like their product. I think the network's fine. I just think that they've done a horrible job in marketing it, and they've done a horrible job in estimating the audience for it. And it's really been just colossal mistake after colossal mistake. And I think with what we mentioned about this whole thing with Rogers and them, they're starting on the wrong foot in Canada as well because you're forcing people out of the loop, so to speak, at the beginning of this. You want everyone on board to start this. I mean, that just makes simple sense to me. Like, do they really want to alienate potential customers in Canada by giving it to Rogers exclusively? That's not a good idea, in my opinion.
They
I get
obviously didn't their homework, right? Because they must think that Rogers is like the conglomerate, and that a majority of the country is on their plan. That's not it's not true at all. A lot of people are on Bell, a lot of people are on other outlets. So you're absolutely right. They're just shooting themselves in the foot right off the bat.
well, if you're in Western Canada, you're screwed. I mean, I had put Shaw Cable in the report I wrote on the CondoOnTheMoon.com. Someone corrected me and said TELUS is really the major cable provider out west. But the point is, it isn't Rogers, and a lot of people get left out of that loop, and eventually they're going to be drawn back into it. But I'm totally confused on what I'm getting with the WWE network here because of the fact that it's not exactly going to be the same as in the United States. Vince McMahon compared it to having HBO Go, which I don't have either, so I don't know what that is exactly, but it definitely seems like Canada's going to have their own kind of screwed up version of the WWE network. And I don't know if that's a good idea either. Like, I just want to be able to get it like everybody else gets it. I don't want to have to deal with all this nonsense that apparently we're going to have to. And again, this goes back to the fact that they had to break their TV deal with Rogers to get the network on in the whole first place. And good for the WWE, they got a 10-year agreement in place for their broadcast rights with Rogers, which I think is a positive for them. But at what price and at what cost to their network? And that's the thing. And everything right now with the WWE is all focused on this network because they've made it that way. It's their own doing. They did this themselves. They have only themselves to blame at the end of the day.
I love how you made the point about how they haven't marketed this properly, because it certainly hasn't been through a lack of trying. If you watch Monday Night Raw every week and Michael Cole is pushing the damn network every chance he gets when the camera's on the announce table. But yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. This whole network, at least now, and this is still early, we're not even a year into it. It's been a mitigated disaster. A lot of people are losing their jobs. It's losing money. There's still issues with the network itself. There's streaming problems. People are upset that there's not a lot of original content. So, but again, I reserve judgment until this thing goes overseas, because I think then we'll really have a good understanding of if people are interested in this and if it can sustain the amount of subscribers. Because losing 38,000 people at this point is not a good number to have.
Well, pushing up this release internationally is a clear sign of panic on their part. And here's the big thing. There's a couple things, actually. What's this going to do to the network overall? Because we all saw as observers how awful the rollout was in the United States. People were having all kinds of problems. They weren't getting on. They weren't being able to sign up for the network. The network wasn't working right. Are we going to experience this same problem all over again now that you have international markets now coming in on this feed? That's an issue. First impressions are lasting impressions, and maybe that's why 128,000 people said, you know what? No thanks. We've seen it. We saw it. No, we don't want any more. But the other thing well, there's a couple other things to consider. It's been widely talked about, and I mean, it's almost to the point of how people talk about marijuana, in the sense that we know a lot of people do it, but it's not really treated like a big deal. And with the WWE network, we know a lot of people are watching it that aren't from the United States of America, and those impact on that international number. I mean, how many of those people we're going to find out. And if the WWE doesn't reach their magic number of 1 million by the end of the year, or I think it's 1,200,000 to 1,400,000, which is their break-even point, boy, are they in some trouble then.
And I'm only going to say this, from my perspective and the way I see things with the network. Again, like I said, I'm not going to be ordering it when it does come to Canada, but there's a reason for it, and that being, as much of a wrestling fan as that I am, and the fact that I would always love to go back and look at some of the older stuff. There's just, I mean, how many times would someone who's even a bigger fan than me use the network, during a week, maybe once or twice? And I'm already putting down $7-8 a month for Netflix, and people are more likely to watch a movie or skim through a television series than they are to watch, some old ECW or WCW pay-per-views. And I think just the intrigue behind the network and just what made it so cool in the first place, that magic wears off after a while, and I think that's why we're seeing a lot of people just abandoning the network already. And like you said, with some of these numbers coming internationally because people are using nefarious means, they're just kind of testing it and seeing, you know what, I don't have to pay for it yet, but I might as well just see what it's all about, see if it's worth my money. And people are getting the light bulbs above their heads, saying, you know what, it's not.
Yeah, or some people are paying for it, but they're still using those means to get it. Either way, it's a problem. And one of the other things, when this network launched originally, there was all this talk of all this original content. Well, that was great when they thought the plan was going to work and everything was going to be rosy. But now, with all this cost cutting, they're cutting back on the idea of producing original content for this network, which is one of the reasons that you would get it in the whole first place. Because beyond that, as you said, it's a monthly pay-per-view, and it's going back to watch your favorite whatever match. Like I'm a Randy Savage fan, go back, watch Randy Savage drop the elbow on Ted DiBiase again, and watch him win the title. You can only do that so many times, and then you run out of things that you want to see for the average fan. And I just think there's a lot of problems with this. At the end of the day, I do think the WWE is going to come out on the other side of this fine, but the the problems short term are becoming much larger than they anticipated, and that is becoming really crystal clear, I think. And you mentioned about Michael Cole and the marketing of it. It's gotten to the point of they're begging. Like, they never did a hard sell at the beginning of this network, and that was shocking to me, given the way the WWE used to promote their app. I mean, we all used to make the jokes about how we were sick and tired of hearing about the WWE app on Monday Night Raw on a weekly basis. With the network, they didn't do that, but they really should have. I mean, the app compared to the network, it's night and day. I mean, you want people to get this network. They should have pushed harder earlier, and now they're just coming off as desperate.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Michael Cole, he might as well be on his knees at this point, just saying, please sign up for the network. We need to hit these margins. We need to hit these numbers eventually. But like we're saying, short term, it looks awful. But and in the next couple of months, hopefully things will look a little bit better when it goes overseas and whatnot. And yeah, I mean, there's really no positive light to put on it at this point. And we haven't even talked about the fact about some of the actual cuts that have taken place. We reported at WrestlingRumors.net that already 55 employees have lost their jobs after the numbers were released this morning. And it also looks like they're actually going to can the WWE magazine entirely just because of budget cuts.
Yeah, but that one's more the way of the world right now. I mean, magazines are going the way of the dinosaur, so that one's not as that's a cut that I can see makes a lot of sense. But it's just one of those things. And people were saying about Ricardo Rodriguez. I think that wasn't anything to do with this. I think Ricardo just got sick of not being able to wrestle.
He said that himself on Twitter, so it was not a budgetary thing.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see, at least at this point, we're going to see a bunch of people being cut from the roster necessarily at this point. But that's on the table too. I think everything's on the table right now, and from all points of this company, I think you should be concerned, from the people down at NXT training all the way up to the top. I mean, this company, they will survive. To quote the old CM Punk line, the wheel will keep turning, but at what cost will it be to the people within the system? And as you mentioned, like 55 people being released who work in the offices and in various departments, it's just really sad, like, to see those people who, honestly, a lot of them have nothing to do with it. Like, whether the WWE is successful or not is not dependent on the guy who gets the mail down in the mail room or the guy who's the security guard on the third floor. He's not the problem. He's not in creative meetings. He's not telling them who to push. These are the types of people that are losing jobs, and that is sad, because let's face it, in the world at large, it's not easy.
They're a victim of circumstance, and they're a victim of war. The WWE Network, they don't have anything to do with it. But when you're losing money and you just have to kind of look up and down the list of guys who work for your company and say, you know what, he's expendable, she's expendable, we could save a couple of $1,000 a month just by getting them off the books.
Yeah, actually,
you do what you got to do.
Actually, my colleague Brian Fritz, I encourage people to go check it out. He did a interview with Alex Greenfield, who many people know used to work on the creative team, and he shed some light on this and what happens at the WWE in the past when they've made cuts. Basically, they just send out a memorandum to each department. You have to cut your budget by this amount. Do it. So that means, like, physically, people lose their job in almost every department of the WWE when these kind of things happen, because that's how they do business there.
Not a good time to be in WWE at the end of the day.
Although Kevin Steen, it is a good time for him.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to Kevin Steen. That's the thing. We have went like over half an hour, and we have not talked one bit of wrestling. It has been all business related, and that's kind of what the stories have been in this week. And that probably isn't a good thing either because SummerSlam is coming, and yet the focus is everywhere else but for a lot of people, and that's not a good thing in and of itself.
Well, it's hard to get excited about a pay-per-view where the main event, the two guys are basically going to be rotating appearances on Monday Night Raw until the final week before the show because John Cena is going to be taking time off to work on his movie. Brock Lesnar can't show up in the first place because they're not going to pay him to be there every week. So when that's your marquee blockbuster match and you can't promote it the way you want to, the interest in your pay-per-view goes down. Not to mention the fact that a majority of the card is going to be built up by rematches. We just saw at Battleground, we're going to be getting Chris Jericho versus Bray Wyatt again. Tomorrow night on SmackDown, it's going to be announced that we're going to get a Rusev versus Jack Swagger match in a flag match. We're likely going to see AJ Lee and Paige do battle again. And then, Monday Night Raw this week closed with a segment between Brie Bella and Stephanie McMahon, which is basically being pushed as the co-main event.
Yeah, it really is, and I mean, I think we'll leave a lot of the wrestling chatter for tomorrow on the podcast, especially now we're probably not going to have our guests, so we'll have some more time. So I think we'll leave the wrestling chat mostly for that. But I do want to focus in on that last thing you said about Brie Bella and Stephanie and being the co-main event. That's actually our poll question on CondoOnTheMoon.com. We are asking you, what match beyond Brock Lesnar and John Cena is the one you're looking forward to at SummerSlam? And I'm interested to see how the results pan out for that because in the WWE's mind, the co-main event, I agree with you, is Stephanie McMahon versus Brie Bella, and it speaks to a larger thing where the women have actually been getting quite the opportunity, and I think are failing miserably right now. I wrote for Between the Ropes this week about the whole idea of the women getting all this opportunity, and they're just flushing it down the toilet. I really think that. The Stephanie Brie angle, I think, has been great, but all the stuff under it, I think, has been terrible.
I disagree. I think the AJ and Paige storyline, sorry, blundering today. I think that storyline's been great, and they got rid of the Frenemies Act, and they had their little back and forth on Monday Night Raw, with the tease that, AJ Lee's going back to this like certifiable badass where she's not going to put up with Paige turning on her and whatnot. And then even the lesser storylines, they even had a match with Naomi and Cameron, further pushing that whole Funkadactyl split. So I think the division hasn't looked this strong in quite some time. We have 3 ongoing storylines.
Well, you got 4, but
what's the fourth one?
The fourth is Layla and
Summer
Rae.
Yeah, but that's not like Diva versus Diva.
It's time. It's time though, and women are a part of it. And I mean, part of how, in all honesty, you go back in time. How did Trish and Lita get over? They were in angles with the men, and then did stuff on their own. So I mean, there is a track record for that if you do it successfully, which obviously is not being done by Summer Rae and Layla. That angle is terrible.
What's going on with Fandango? I thought Damien Sandow had it bad. This guy's losing to Diego now twice.
He's lost to Zack Ryder. I mean, this Johnny Curtis, the man behind Fandango, I feel incredibly. We talk about people getting fired and cut. Fandango, be worried. That would be my advice right now because it's not looking good for him.
When you're getting booked worse than Damien Sandow, you're pretty much at the bottom of the barrel, and that's not putting it. I'm a Johnny Curtis fan. I think if he had anything other than this Fandango gimmick, he'd be, a decent mid-card guy for the company. Right now, he's just, Los Waistadores. Like you're losing to one of those guys. I know you have to put up with the whole Summer Rae and Layla thing being ringside and kind of interfering in your matches, but obviously the company has no idea what they're going to do with him, and they can't put another diva with him. They're actually teasing that it's going to be Emma, because she mentioned on Twitter that Fandango, if you're looking for somebody, I know how to dance. So we might even see Emma be
Oh
Fandango's new
no!
side girl.
Oh no! Emma doing her dance with Fandango. That they both could go down.
She'll steal
Emma's
his hair
already
gel.
Emma's
She'll
already in
steal.
trouble from the whole Walmart thing. I mean, she could go down in flames with this. But no, I haven't liked these angles. AJ and Paige, it was a simple story and they made it way too complicated. Paige should have just turned straight, went heel, and we haven't seen that. They're even. It's very confusing. Do you remember back when they had the ongoing thing with Kofi Kingston and The Miz?
Yeah, well, they've done that a couple of times. What are you referring to?
That feud was very wishy-washy and unclear on who was the face, who was the heel, who was anything in that angle, and it was terrible. And this, to me, with Paige and AJ, has been the female equivalent to that.
No, I disagree. Just because they had to get some mileage out of this feud, they couldn't just say we'll have Paige turn right away and then expect to extend this for like 4 or 5 months, because that's basically what they're trying to do. Because there's no one really else they can throw into this thing at this point. You started them off with the friends. Paige eventually turns after the first pay-per-view. You get even more matches out of them. What's wrong with that?
They were never friends. When were they friends?
When they were teaming up, on Monday Night Raw and whatnot, and then they ended up having their match at Battleground.
No, this has been terrible. But and then you mentioned the Funkadactyls. I mean, can we talk about the train wreck of all train wrecks? This has been horrible. Cameron cannot wrestle. She is one of the worst wrestlers in this company. I could say she was the worst, but Eva Marie is still employed by this company, so that makes that irrelevant. Plus, they've, in their characters that they've broken off into, both of them are having fashion problems like the Shield did in terms of finding them a new look. I'm not digging that. And Naomi is far too talented to be in the ring with Cameron. It just takes away all the value in her when you have her losing to someone who honestly, even for the most average fan, can tell is not a good professional wrestler. You take the most average generic fan, they can watch a Cameron match and say, yeah, that chick can't wrestle. And when you lose to someone like that, real, fake, or otherwise, people just, it takes the air out of the balloon.
Why do you think I picked Cameron to win her match on the pre-show against Naomi? It wasn't because she was a better wrestler. It's clear as day as to who's the better performer, but because of storylines, the fact that they might want to get a little bit more sizzle out of a Funkadactyl split, you have Cameron go over, but then Naomi prevails in the end, which hopefully was this past Monday night on Raw after she won that tag team match with Natalia and Alicia Fox, who teamed with Cameron. The looks, Cameron has this like dirty schoolgirl thing going on. Naomi's wearing what she usually wears pretty much. She had like her long hair on Monday Night Raw. I'm putting way too much thought into this whole storyline. It's more talk than it deserves.
No, but I'm just pointing out it's terrible. And like,
yeah, she's awful.
The WWE's history with giving women opportunity is not the greatest. And I think,
for example,
no, it just isn't. I mean, the WWE divas have been booked in the popcorn match for I don't know how long, and it's only been recently where they're actually getting a couple matches on pay-per-views and stuff like that, and being actually booked in a position where they have a chance to succeed. And I just think that all the angles are not working the way they should, and the WWE's patience for that, generally speaking, hasn't been good. They don't tend to run with the women for too long. If it doesn't work out, they just get shipped right back to where they were, and that's not a good thing for all of the divas when you look at it. that said, the feud between Brie and Stephanie has caught the imaginations of people and has been very good. And oh, it just happens to have a McMahon in it. Wow, that kind of makes you wonder.
It's been executed really well. It's had one of the better builds thus far. It's beginning at Payback when Brie Bella quit, and now leading to this, and then having the closing segment, which it honestly shocked me. I didn't think they were going to do that. I thought, at the 9 o'clock hour when Stephanie and Hunter came out, I thought Brie would do her thing, but then we saw the Y2J segment leading to his match with Seth Rollins, obviously. But yeah, the fact that they're putting so much stock into this feud right now, and it's hard to ignore it just because Stephanie McMahon is involved. But hopefully this is just kind of like a one-off thing at SummerSlam. It's a big pay-per-view. They want someone who hasn't competed in a wrestling ring since 2003 like Stephanie to compete, and she'll probably go over in the end, and then Brie Bella will be left feuding with maybe her sister.
Yeah, I was gonna into that in a minute, but we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, it really seems like a feud that people genuinely want to see, like a women's match that people are really invested in and actually want to see. And it's been a long time since there's been that, where the majority of wrestling fans are really invested in a women's program. One of the things I wanted to bring up, though, that first part, one of your so-called logic gasps by the WWE, someone brought it up on Twitter, and I thought it was really funny. Triple H is out there with Stephanie. Jericho comes out. How did Triple H know that was going to happen? Because there was Seth Rollins right there to jump him, yet Triple H would have had no knowledge of Chris Jericho coming out there.
Well, either that or he just knew that Chris Jericho was or Rollins was backstage watching Jericho be insulting to Stephanie, and he just kind of came out, and then Triple H put two and two together and said, I'll book a match between the guys. That's the only thing I could come up with.
Seth Rollins has spidey senses, maybe.
When people say stuff like that on Twitter, it's like they're taking it too literally. Just stop looking into all of the logic. Wrestling isn't logical. That's why it's wrestling.
Yeah, but I think that's the trick to it, though, right? Because you are having to suspend your disbelief, and it's little moments like that can take people out of it. And then that's the key. Like, it depends on Chris Walder's leaving. He's disgusted with what I have to say. Those are the little moments. And some people, I grant you, some people are much more anal about it than others. But those moments where you lose that suspension of disbelief are key to the whole thing working.
Yeah, but I don't try and look too much into things. I just say,
You're not
what?
a deep
It happened.
guy, are you, Chris Walter?
I'm not. Is this surprising to anybody? Like, that I don't have many deep thoughts when it comes to wrestling? I just say, you know what? Jericho's there. Rollins attacked him. They're having a match. Bam. I don't look any more into it after that point. Next segment, bring on Natalya and Alicia Fox. That's all I care about. On to the next one, James.
Chris Walter getting upset here on the video podcast. He's very perturbed.
This is about the time on every podcast that I just let loose and I just say.
Yeah,
if you listened to our audio podcast last week, you know exactly what we're talking about.
That's right. Generally speaking, Chris Walter, not the best closer in the business. Let's just say that.
My relief duties are awful.
But no, it's one of those things though. This feud has really been great, and you teased it earlier, and there has been a lot of talk of what the actual outcome of this match is going to be, and I had said this. I don't know if I said it in talking with you, but I had said this. The whole idea of Nikki Bella ending up being a heel at the end of all of this makes a heck of a lot of sense, and Stephanie actually winning the match because of it. And the fact that the WWE seems committed to keep Daniel Bryan far, far away from this makes me think that even more.
Yeah, there's not going to be a clean finish at SummerSlam, and I don't think Daniel Bryan's going to appear there. Some people are speculating that he might, but then you would have to have Triple H out there, and then those two would pretty much become the focal point of everything. And you don't want to take anything away from the two women in the ring. So I think the only thing you can really do at this point is have Nikki Bella turn, and then you get a couple months out of a Bella versus Bella feud, which not a lot of people might want to see, but this isn't something that can last a couple of months with Brie and Stephanie. Stephanie isn't a trained wrestler. This is going to be a special attraction, her wrestling at SummerSlam, and then afterwards Brie goes on to fight Nikki, and then maybe John Cena comes out and gives an attitude adjustment to Brie or something. I don't know.
You know what, though? That's the other thing. We're talking about breaks in logic. During this whole angle, Nikki has been being just tormented by Stephanie. Where is our fair-haired John Cena to defend his girlfriend?
There's loyalty and respect between Cena and Nikki, but there's no hustle to go help her every time she's in trouble.
Apparently not. John Cena has better things to do. Sorry about your luck there, Nikki. It might make sense now that one of the Bellas has a wedding ring and one doesn't.
But one of them has a special feature that distinguishes her from the other that a lot of men enjoy. And I'm sure Cena does, which is why I'm surprised he hasn't helped his girlfriend, because you would think that he would want to keep her in one piece, if you know what I'm saying.
Apparently not.
Apparently not.
He doesn't care.
It's because she doesn't wear the ring gear. She doesn't wear the wristband. She doesn't wear the hat. She's not pushing his merchandise. What kind of a girlfriend is that?
Anyway, on a serious note, though, one of the things that was surprising to me, and in fact, not even just surprising, but almost a little disconcerting to me, we had Daniel Bryan be a legitimate, real-life hero this week. He took down a robber, and
he wasn't a hero.
Well, he takes down a criminal who is robbing his home, brings him to justice with a chokehold, and makes legitimate news. Like, this is a legitimate news story that everyone picked up on, because it's just the classic, like, news story where, oh yeah, we got the professional wrestler taking down a criminal. This doesn't happen every day. And the WWE, who is dying for that attention. When any, like, famous person tweets about them, they go on about it like it's validation that they are the greatest thing since sliced bread. Yet on Raw, we see nothing. Nada. Not one mention of this whole thing.
What were they supposed to do? He's hurt. He's not going to be on television. What, are they going to mention it? Just like do like a special video package about how Bryan choked the guy out?
Yeah! Do like a little segment where, and Daniel Bryan, he's recuperating. We hope he gets better and well. But did you see in the news this week what Daniel Bryan did in real life? I mean, it's positive press. There's nothing you get wrong out of this. Like, it's a home run. Like, go take it. Like, this is your WWE superstar out there in the world doing good, almost being like a crime fighter like Batman, for God's sake.
Look, here's what I think. Especially if you're going to push Daniel Bryan as like this hero, which you think he is, but all he did was stop a guy from raiding his house. So I don't know how exactly he's a hero. Sure, if there's a guy breaking out of my house and I can catch him, sure, why not? He's stealing my stuff. I'm going to knock him on his butt.
You put the yes lock or a chokehold on a burglar.
I'll just kick him in the nads and then hopefully he just falls down for the count. That's all I'm capable of doing. But, yeah, if you're showcasing Daniel Bryan doing acts like that and stopping criminals, everyone, especially the casual fan, is still under the impression that this guy is seriously hurt, and everyone's going to be, coming up with these thoughts that, well, maybe Daniel Bryan isn't as hurt as they're letting on. If he can go and catch a criminal and with an injured neck and an injured shoulder and take him down with a rear naked choke, maybe Daniel Bryan will be coming back, and maybe he's just around the corner. His neck is fine. No, you just try not to make any allusions to that. You try not to mention it at all. And maybe Michael Cole will say, we have exclusive footage of the takedown from Bryan. If you want to watch it, tune into the WWE Network and subscribe.
Maybe it's on Total Divas.
It's on Total. Yeah, they had a camera crew with him in the car. I didn't know he lived in Phoenix too. Where did that come from? I thought they were moving into a house in Washington.
No, I think Bree has family there because he just moved there.
Right.
Well, anyway, we're about ready to wrap things up in a couple minutes. By the way, I love the background, how it's changed on your end there. We are the condo on the moon, and you literally have Earth in the background in like black, like you're in space. That is.
I've got the whole world in my hand. Yeah.
Very good.
Walder's World right there, buddy.
Wow. But that is, I noticed that, and I was just like, it just caught my attention, and I was like, wow.
This is how I close out my last podcast ever, my last video podcast ever. I gotta have the cool moon in the background. It's a globe, but same thing.
I was going to get to that, Chris Walder, but you beat me to it. Yes, Chris Walder is, of course, doing wrestling and basketball and doing lots of things. So he's still going to be with us on Fridays doing the audio podcast, but this is the last time you will see his face on the show. Although, in all honesty, you are welcome to come back when you have free time. Like, if you want to hop in
absolutely,
for a week, you're more than welcome to come back. You're not being fired here. It's not like the WWE. We're not making cuts to our budget where we can't afford to have Walder on.
Spike TV is getting rid of me. It's
not that kind of a situation. So, it's not like you have been dismissed here. So you're welcome to when your schedule suits it, and we can have a three-way because we're going to have someone coming on to fill your shoes. And that is going to be Josh Lopez, who works as well with me on Between the Ropes, and he's going to fill in that second chair for the video podcast every week. And it'll be you and me on Fridays doing the audio thing, and that's how it's going to work going forward. But I want to say this. I think people get the impression that we have this adversarial thing going on if you listen to our podcasts and the video podcast. But in all seriousness, Chris Walder has been a tremendous help to me in getting these podcasts off the ground and going, and I really appreciate that for all the time and dedication he has put into everything, and is going to continue to on Fridays. And I wanted to say that publicly on the record, so you have that now, Chris Walder. And I even tried to help you out and get you a basketball thing. We don't know if that's working out, but hopefully that does. I put in the good word. That's all I can do. So go Raptors, go! And Chris Walder will still be hanging out like halfway in wrestling. He's like half and half.
I'm somewhere in the middle, yeah.
Which is kind of ironic because on this same day, I am literally officially today full wrestling because DinoNationBlog.com, which is where I wrote about basketball for over 6 years, the website it's still up there with Blogger, but the .com is officially done today. So I am officially all in on wrestling.
As the WWE, clean.
As the WWE is in peril, TNA is about to go out of business, but ROH is doing good, and I got some good contacts with them. So hopefully I have made the right decision with where I'm going with my career. But I can always go back to basketball if things don't work out. The one thing wrestling has taught me, and we will leave on this note, is never say never, Chris Walder. CM Punk could come back. The world could be a great place. CM Punk and Daniel Bryan could be crime fighters together. That could be a show on the WWE Network that would draw ratings.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
Batman and Robin, CM Punk and Daniel Bryan. That is not coming to the WWE Network anytime soon. And, that is a shame. we are coming your way Thursday and Fridays here on the Video Podcast. A new co-host with me next week, Josh Lopez, and we look forward to that. And Chris and I, as always, on the Friday, kicking it on the audio side of things. And we will be doing that, talking much more wrestling in SummerSlam, which we talked very little of on this podcast because, quite frankly, there was a lot of other stuff going on this week. So once again, as I said, thank you, Chris Walder. You've been a great help, and I appreciate it. And all the best to you with all your endeavors, both with us and elsewhere.
Giving me the John Laurinaitis treatment, I see.
No, that would be all the best in your future endeavors, but part of your future is still with us. So
Well, that's true.
We're not firing you.
Well, my
I thought I made that clear earlier. You see,
I know.
This is the awkward ending, Chris Walder here. You see, we're trying to go out on a positive.
Well, I'll give you a positive
note.
ending. I'll give you a positive ending.
Right.
My final, well, for now, my final video podcast, and don't you worry, I will be back. I'll be making appearances sporadically when I can. I just want to thank James for allowing me to come on and do these with him, the audio podcast and the video podcast. He's the heart and soul of Condo on the Moon. He does all the work, all the great articles, puts up all the polls, gets all the interviews. He deserves a majority, all of the credit. Basically, I just trying to come on and help him when he needs it, to help him with the audio podcast. But so thank you, James. Thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it, and you will be seeing me very, very soon.
Well said, Chris Walder. I will be hearing you tomorrow, as all of you will, on our audio podcast. And as for our guest, as we mentioned off the top, I do get the guests, but they need to work with me, and we had a little bit of trouble with that this time around. But we'll get it all solved. Matt Taven will be on the podcast soon, and as well as some other ROH guys as we get ready for their big event, Field of Honor, which is coming up in Brooklyn, New York, and really a big swing for ROH coming up. We haven't talked much about them in the podcast. Maybe we'll touch on it more tomorrow, but they'll be back here in Toronto. Oh, that was part of your homework, Chris Walder. We are going to ROH together still, right? That's still happening.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so tickets. We need those.
I'm on it, buddy.
All right. We'll talk more about that and a lot of other things on the podcast tomorrow. Thank you for taking the time to join us. And we ran a little over time, but we wanted to give Chris Walder the proper send-off he deserves here on the video podcast. So thank you, Chris Walder, and may the force be with you. I feel like saying that because of your background and everything. You look like you're out in space there.
And as my final act on the video podcast, I do the Emma dance. Now the viewers are gone.
All right. Note to people, watch your wallets when you're around Chris Walder. With that said, goodbye. We are out of here. Take care.